So we also have a Stripe chat set up. So if you ever have any questions, this is a community chat. You're welcome to come and join us. It's backed by IRC, and so you can find us there for your favorite client. And we'll answer whatever questions you have. I'd like to start out first with a demo, because I think that's the best way to see the real power of Stripe. So let's do that. Imagine that you're hosting a conference, and maybe you have a hackathon the weekend before, and you then have this great 3-day conference, and you need, you have everything set up, right? And then you just need to give people a way to pay you. It's the most important thing, because conferences aren't free, it turns out. And so you've set up this basic website, you've got a nice logo for TE Emerge, and you're going to accept payments on it. How would you do that? So the answer is with Stripe. If you come over to our website, and you go to sign in, we'll prompt you to sign in or register for a new account. As soon as the internet picks up, we'll do that. And so when we do that, you can create a new account, you can skip the registration process, and have an anonymous account, and use your API keys. Internet's being established, so give it one moment. We'll move on. Michael Shade, S-C-H-A-D-E. So you can go sign up and skip this stuff if you'd like, and it'll drop you right into an anonymous account. This is full featured, so you can do everything you can as if you'd sign up without the burden of actually signing up. If we go in to your account settings, there are 4 API keys here. You'll notice 2 of them are for test mode, and 2 of them are for live mode. Your account lives in 2 separate universes, and so everything that happens with your test API keys is safe and separated from your actual live production. And so when you're testing out your new website, you don't have to worry about breaking your paying customers while you're trying to figure out the next big thing. So we're going to focus on those test API keys because it's free to work with those. By the way, our API is just free in general, there's no monthly cost or anything. So you only worry about paying for successful payments. You can find that information on our website. So we're going to grab the publishable key to start. So I've gone ahead and typed this code out in advance so you guys don't have to watch me make typos up here, because that's not as fun for me. So I'm going to pull that latest version. So if I jump back to the website first and show you what we're dealing with, we now have a form here. You can accept a credit card number, CVC, and the expiry. All the things that you need to make money. And if we come over and look at the code, it's actually pretty simple. So I'm going to jump down first to the bottom of this HTML file. There's just a very basic Sinatra app. And so this asks for those 4 fields. The only thing that you should note about this is that those inputs don't have a name attribute. So they ask for the type and the size and so forth. We don't have a name, so none of these fields ever touch your server. And that's the most important part about this setup, is that you never see the credit card details, and so you don't have to worry about PCI compliance. You don't have to worry about these credit card numbers leaking into your logs or any of those other hassles that you traditionally be burdened with. Instead, you can focus on your business. If we jump up to the top, you have to wonder, okay, well, if the credit card details aren't touching my website, how the hell do I get paid, right? Because it seems like those are a pretty important part of the process. The way you do that is with Stripe.js. You include this little bit of JavaScript on your website, and you set your publishable key. This is something that we just grabbed so we can associate it with your account. And then you hook onto the event handler of your form. So whenever the user presses the submit button, you stop first, you do this create token call where you pass the number, CVC, and so forth to Stripe. It will give you back this token. All it is a short string of 16 characters that you can pass over to your server safely, and it's a nice way to represent your payment information. I'll show you how that actually works in a moment. It's an asynchronous call, so you have to have a response handler. This gets back the HTTP status code and the response. What you really care about here is, was there an error? So our library does some basic sanity checks for you, are the expiration dates in the future and whatnot. If not, which is what we hope to see, because that means you're about to get paid, then you can just put the token into the form. Notice we have the name attribute here, and so this is actually getting sent over to your server. And then you submit it directly. Pretty basic. When we jump back over to our Sinatra application, we just had to add a handler for this. So we require the Stripe library, we set the API key. This is the secret key that was the other one that I ignored earlier. And then you create this register handler. And all it does is calls this create charge API call. All of our amounts are in cents, and so here we're passing in 4,200. That means that we're getting paid $42 for this conference. The currency is in USD, and then you pass in the params. The description is entirely internal, and so all you're doing is this is so that you can use the dashboard later on and see what it's like, and look things up later on very easily. But your customers don't see this, and your customers don't see Stripe at all. If there's an error, of course, you can redirect back. You probably want to display an error message to them. And other ways, you show them the success message. So let's see what this is like. We jump back over to the form. I can enter my credit card number here. Now, our test keys don't let you use your real credit card number for security reasons. So instead, I recommend you head over to stripe.com/docs/testing. All these things are linked to from our docs, and the GitHub repository has links as well. So you don't need to write these down. If you scroll down a bit, you'll see that we give you some test credit card numbers. Now these can give you a variety of results, and the average check fail and so forth, so you can test your program out really easily. But what we really care about is success. We want to get paid right now. So we're going to grab this 4242 number up at the top, switch back over to the website. You can enter in any CVC, any expiry that's in the future, and then click register. And congrats, you just got paid. If you go check your Stripe dashboard, you can see that there's a $42 payment waiting for you, and you've just made money in a few minutes. So that is payments for developers. Our API is comprised of a number of endpoints. We've currently talked about tokens and charges, but there's some other things that you can do, and I'll go ahead and talk about those in a moment. To recap on tokens, those are just short strings that's created by our JavaScript library. You can also create them directly through the API for a mobile app. But these short strings are just a nice, safe way to represent payment information. They're transient, so they'll disappear in about 5 minutes, and they're single use. So as soon as you consume them, you create a charge. You cannot use them again. Now, that's not the greatest setup. You might wonder if you're hosting a store or something like that, you don't want to make your customers enter their payment information every single time. So, and you see what charges already. So we have customer objects. Customer objects are a way, just like creating a charge, to consume this token, save it inside of Stripe, so you don't have to worry about keeping this in your database. And whenever you want to make a charge, you reference this customer instead, and we'll make a charge on your behalf. These customer objects are pretty cool because you can do other things like subscriptions, and that's what we'll see in a moment. You can create a plan right from your dashboard or through the API, and so after you've hosted this first TE Emerge conference, you find out that everyone's excited, they have booths set up downstairs, and like everyone's just helping you sell this thing out the first day that you want, right? Like this is a really exciting conference. They probably want to come every single year, and so you want an easy way for them to do that. So let's see how you might achieve that for sure. So the first thing to do is to jump over to your dashboard. It's a simple way to start. You can go into plans, and you can create your very first plan. So you need to give it an ID, something that you're going to reference in the API. In this case, we'll call it Emerge. We'll give it a nice, pretty name, and we'll charge. I like $42, but we'll go ahead and go with $38, maybe because they're paying every year, so they get a discount. You can see we support a variety of intervals, and so if you want to charge quarterly or even every 4 months or some weird interval like that, you can do that very easily. But for us, we're going to stay pretty simple and go yearly. And you've just created a plan. So if we jump back over to the code, again I typed this out because I'm scared of typos. You can see that the payment form didn't change at all. You built this thing once, you don't have to worry about it. If you look back over your code, this similarly didn't really change that much. We changed the Stripe charge create bit over to Stripe customer create. And you pass in the plan, you pass in the card, and Stripe takes care of everything else for you. We'll renew the subscriptions for you, we'll take care of prorations, we'll do all the things that you don't want to deal with because you'd rather host a conference or build your software, do whatever it is you want to focus on. Now, of course, there are other things in our API. We've only talked about tokens, charges, customers, and plans. So what's left? Well, there's the account endpoint. This is a pretty simple one. It's just a nice way to get some information about your account. There's subscriptions. These are pretty related to the plans, but you can control some other things. So there are per seat pricing. You can imagine that if you want to charge someone $10 per family member per month, and they have 5 family members, you can just say quantity equals 5 and we'll do the math for you. If we also have these invoice items. Those aren't invoices in the traditional sense. We're not mailing anything to your customers or sending them emails to tell them to pay up. Instead, this is a nice way to think about what is a recurring payment. So it's this way of saying that when that next year comes around and you're ready to pay for a TE Emerge game, it's a nice way to tell you what's going to be paid and give you, the developer, an opportunity to adjust that. And there's more information about that on the website, but they're pretty cool and check them out. We also have our coupons, and so you can have a variety of ways to offer discounts to your customers. You can especially imagine after you just launched your hackathon project and you're ready to get paid, maybe you want to give out 5 coupons. So we'll take care of the redemptions, the times, everything else for you. it'll do all the math once again. And last, and one of my most favorite parts of Stripe, aside from getting paid, is events. Events help you find out what's happening in your Stripe account. So every successful charge that you see, every time one of your customers pays you again next year, and maybe you want to do something about it, there's an event in it. Now this is an API endpoint, so it would require you to pull our servers, and that's kind of annoying. So instead we have this webhooks system. Those that aren't familiar with webhooks, it's basically Stripe talking to your servers. We're going to sit down and let them know what's happening, keep them up to date. So when something happens in your account, we'll reach out to your server with a post. We'll let them know, we'll give them a nice JSON payload that says, here's what just happened. And then your server can act on that accordingly. Now I really like these because it gives you an opportunity to really separate out your logic in your system. You can imagine that maybe you have a payment form on 3 different areas of your website, but you always want to send out receipts to your customers. So that's pretty good practice. And so you can use webhooks to handle the receipt logic in this one place. And then everywhere else that you create payments, it just takes care of it automatically, even if you go create the payment from your dashboard. And so this is a nice way to make sure that your system stays up to date. Now, testing webhooks can be kind of difficult. So Jeff Lindsay wrote some really cool tools. One of them is local tunneling, and we'll be using those in that in a moment. That's basically just a way to make sure that your computer is available to the internet. The other one is request bin. And so this is a way that you can set up request bin as your webhook endpoint. And whenever we reach out to go tell you about something, you can see on the request bin and get a really nice view of what's happening without having to do any coding here. So let's go play with that really quickly. So the first thing to do is to set up local tunnel for our case, because we need to make sure that my computer can actually receive events. And so I'll go ahead and run this command. It's really simple to set up, and it has instructions on the website. It looks like I'm 4A152. So I'll go grab this. I'll jump over to my Stripe dashboard. I'll go to my account settings, and I'll go to webhooks. As soon as I add this URL, and we're going to go and put this at /webhooks/Stripe. Stripe will keep me up to date with everything that happens without me having to lift a finger. And so I'll come back over to my code. I do have to add one little bit so that I know, when Stripe reaches out to this endpoint, what's happening. And so I've written that already. And it's pretty small. Basically, we'll send some JSON to your server. The second line here is just me being extra secure, taking the ID from the JSON payload. And you can see what these objects look like by just looking at our API documentation. And I take this ID and I retrieve it from Stripe using my API key, the same thing that I use to create charges. So this way I know that it's valid and that someone didn't just find my webhook URL and it's just being a malicious code. And I'm not going to send receipts right now, but I will go ahead and dump this out to the screen. So if we come back over and we go ahead and pay one more time, enter in my information. I just got paid. As usual, we can see this in our dashboard. And if I jump back, you can see this JSON payload that was just sent. And so you can use this to send out receipts or all those other use cases I talked about. There's one other use case with webhooks that's really nice, which is for metered billing. You can imagine that if you were going to charge people based on the number of videos they saw each month because they weren't being productive enough at work or something like that, that you would put them on a $0 plan, so you charge them nothing by default. You're going to assume they're going to be good and they're going to work and not watch whatever videos. And then every time they watch a video, you're going to keep track of that in your database. And every month, Stripe is going to reach out to your server with a webhook and say, hey, we just created this invoice. We're going to wait 1 hour and let you figure out if you want to do anything with it. By default, we'll just go ahead and pay whatever the amount price is, or whatever the default price is. But you can use those invoice items that I mentioned to say, okay, well, they watched 15 videos at $10 each, and so we're going to add that charge to their invoice. And so you can adjust these invoices dynamically, and all of a sudden you can have metered billing with about 10 lines of code. And you don't have to worry about the cron jobs or anything else. Like, we'll take care of that. Webhooks are, of course, also resilient. So if your server goes down and we can't get in touch with you, we're not just going to give up altogether. We'll go ahead and try every hour for up to 3 days before we then move on and figure out it's a lost cause. There are also logs on our dashboard, and I recommend that if you're going and using Stripe for your hackathon project, you make really good use of these. Basically, it's just a nice way to see all the requests that you're sending to the Stripe API and all the responses that you get back. And so what's nice about this is you don't have to change your code to dump out this information And if you're trying to debug your code, you probably don't want to be changing things. So it's a nice way to see what's happening without making modifications to everything else. Now the last thing that I really want to talk about and focus on is something that we've been playing around with, which is Stripe applications. So if we think for a second how you might use this. Say you created this TE Emerge conference, it was hugely successful, and tons of great sponsors, you had a great turnout, and people really like what you've done with this conference. And clearly you figured out the payment thing because people have paid you lots of money and they've been able to show up, right? And so now you want to take this knowledge and you want to share it with the world. You want to make it easy for everyone else to accept payments for their very own conference. So if I want to host a baking conference next week, I can go do that. And I don't have to figure out this payment infrastructure myself. I'm probably not even a program. So let's go take a look at this flow and see what it's like to work with us. So if we jump back and we go to our docs, it's just stripe.com/apps. Again, this is a beta thing, but we have all of our documentation available online right now. You can jump over to the Getting Started section, and we'll give you a nice little reminder that you need to go enable this for your account first. So as soon as you click through to that, it'll take you to your application settings and give you an opportunity to set this up. Now, I already configured mine, but it asks for your name, get your website, and I'll show you in a moment why this is important. It also gets your logo. So the idea here is that when someone visits your Stripe app, they can create a new Stripe account if they don't already have one, or use an existing Stripe account if they already have one. It'll give them a nice co-branded application for those that don't have one, an opportunity to fill out all their information. And so for someone that's not a programmer, they can fill this thing out, press a button, and magically there are something payments on the web without having to write a single line of code. We've taken care of that for them. So I'm going to go ahead and change one thing, which is my webhook URL. And if we set this, we come back over, let's upgrade to the latest version, and take a look at how this works. So I'll show you the code in a minute and explain what's actually happening behind the scenes, but I think it's important to understand what the user sees. And so we give you this form to create a new conference. I'm not sure of good conference names, but I think one that we might try is Disrupt and see what that's like. So I'm going to create a conference, I'm going to call it Disrupt, and I'm going to connect with Stripe. Behind the scenes, the server is saving the name that I want so they can keep track of it. They're sending it over to Stripe so I can fill out an account application. You can pre-fill all these fields for your user if you know the data, so you can make it even easier for them if they are already entering this information. For demo mode, we don't want to make you fill out applications every time, so you can just skip this. And great, you just created a sign-up page. So if I look over at my Stripe account, or this is an incognito window, so it's a completely new Stripe account, notice that I don't have any payments. If I follow this link, I can go ahead and enter my payment information once again. And if I come back, I should have been paid, and I was. Let's go down the browser. And then we redirect them to Stripe. For this, we've created connect.stripe.com/OAuth/authorize. This is the first step in the process. We're going to pass in 3 fields. The first is the client ID, which is that app ID that we saw above to identify your application, and so we know what to even show the user. The next is just your scope, and so this is the permissions. You can imagine some applications that if you're visualizing Stripe account data coming up with a cool display, which I hope someone does, could only want read-only access because they don't want to make any charges or modify the account. Here we want to actually make charges on behalf of our customers, so they're going to get read-write access. And the third one is a response type of code, and this is the standard thing you should include in the URL. The next endpoint is that redirect URL that I had set before. So this login/Stripe. And what's happening here is when it hits, we can't completely trust it yet, right? Because we have this client ID, we've exposed that to users, and so we need to make sure this application is still authorized to actually access the account. And the way that we do that is by using our secret key. And so, again, you hit connect.stripe.com/OAuth/token. You pass in 3 parameters. The one thing that Stripe posts to you is a code. You then also say that your grant type is authorization code, and you give the app ID. As the actual security measure, we then have the authorization to identify that you are who you say you are. So you set this authorization header using the bearer scheme. You can find out how to do this for your language. There are also a lot of OAuth terms that will help make this easy for you. and you set in your API key. Again, this is the secret key that you're using to make charges or anything else. It's just a JSON payload, and so we're assuming success here that the documentation tells you how to do the error handling too. And I'm going to store the important bits of information in the database. So what I've got is the user ID, a way to find out what Stripe account is creating these charges, an access token, which is a special secret key created for my application, and a publishable key, which is what we're going to use with Stripe.js. And so this is all you need to have the access to start making charges. Now, we do have to change some of the code that we had written before. And most importantly is on the main page, when we ask for the credit card information, remember we had given a publishable key, which is what Stripe.js uses to take your payment information and store it securely for you. So we're going to make one small change, which is that instead of hard coding our own publishable key, we're going to use whatever Ruby gives to us, whatever snapshot passes over to this field. And here we're just pulling that right out of the database. We're going to default to the emerge context, which is the first one that we started out with, and we're going to render that in the view. When you submit, it's a similar process. Notice that we haven't changed any code here. The Stripe charge creation is saying we're using our API. The only thing that we're doing differently is setting an API key that's specific to this application. And that's it. With those changes, you can enable your users to sign up and start accepting payments without touching any code. Which is what makes Stripe payments for everyone. And we're still trying this out, and I encourage you guys to give it a shot if you think that you're interacting, that you want to provide a way for your users to interact in a different way. But it's a great way to create software as a service or any sort of environment where you want to make it easy for your users to connect their Stripe accounts without worrying about these API keys and all that nonsense. Now let's take a look back at what we just accomplished. In 23 lines of code, you've been able to receive one-time charges. In 29 lines of code, you've been able to accept money every single year. And with 71 lines of code, you've been able to help every single person get paid without them having to worry about having any programming experience, without them having to go through long applications or get lost in the process. This is really important to us, and we've worked hard to make this application, especially for the applications beta, as low cost for users as possible. Because we want to make sure that when they click this button, they don't get lost in the funnel, and this helps them convert over more easily. When you can embed these payments in your website, and it's completely transparent, and you don't have to have a logo or some other payment process on there, so you can focus on accepting the payment information, your customers aren't going to get lost in the funnel. Instead, you're going to focus on your product, which is the most important piece of this. You're going to spend time making that product awesome, not spending your time reinventing the wheel for payments. And that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, what's up? Yeah, you are. This is a new feature that we just added to the beta recently, and it's on the documentation, but basically you'll pass through an application fee. It says let you specify an amount in cents that you want to take from that transaction, and that will get paid to you and run it automatically. You don't have to really worry about the details of how that happens. And you said you had 2 questions? Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, if I'm offering metered billing, do I have to set up something special on the Stripe end? And the answer is no. For metered billing, it's basically you're just processing an invoice as always. And so every time that a subscription is created, like I created a yearly subscription, every year the TE emerge is ready to come around and charge me for that. An invoice got created that will be sent over to my webhook server. They'll give me 1 hour to respond and say, okay, and of course automatically respond. You don't have to sit at your computer or anything. It gives you 1 hour to respond. Get back and say, okay, I want to add these items to the invoice, or I want to apply a discount and I want to subtract the invoice and knock it down. And so if you want to go purely meter billing, you just create a $0 plan. But otherwise, you can charge a base price and you can play with that as you like. Any other questions? Yeah. Sure. So we have our documentation is multilingual, and you can go on there and see how to do things in PHP and Java and so forth. There's also some documentation. If you go to answers.stripe.com, this is a great public Q&A website where you can search for things, and there are PHP examples throughout there as well. And also on stripe.com/docs/examples, you can see examples starting in 1 minute. Example for PHP.
Workshops.
Yeah.
Kind of going back to his question about about getting paid on as an app developer.
Yeah.
Do you guys have split payment capabilities? Kind of if you want to do more than if you want to take one payment, divide it into various Stripe accounts.
No, we don't, and there's a few reasons for this. But the main is that there's certain restrictions when you're accepting these things, right? And so it's really that you're creating a website for others to accept payments, and we don't offer the ability to go more granular than that. Now, if you really want to split payment set up, there's an answer about this on Stripe Answers, and it basically says that you can use programmatic ACH, and this is not something that Stripe itself supports, but if you have a custom use case like that, there are ways to get to that. And if you email me, I'm happy to talk about that more in detail. I'll tell you how to do it. Yeah. I'm sorry, can you say that again? So his question was that if, let's say that I have 15 people involved in this party, and I want to split up payments to all 15 people, can I do that? The answer is no. We'll let you split up payments to the recipient, and so in this case, I created my Stripe account in that incognito window. I get paid, and then maybe TE, because they do put money forward, they're running this website for me. They'll take a cut of the transaction as well. But it's simply a two-party thing. We don't go beyond that. Other questions? Yeah. Sorry, can you say that? No, that's really important to us. So we minimize as much of the setup as possible because we know how important it is that once you get a user to your website, and I was using Stripe for my own business, which is why this is so important to me. When you get a user through this whole funnel, you get to them to the end, and they want to pay you. We're not going to add extra steps to that because it's extra complexity. It's an opportunity to lose your customer, and that is not okay. And so instead, we give you this nice form. That's what Stripe Dance takes care of for you. You're transparently sending this information over to Stripe when they enter their credit card number. You're transparently sending it over to Stripe, and we're transparently getting back to you. And they don't see Stripe. They don't get redirected to another website which has its own prerogatives to sign them up on an account. Instead, we want to keep you in this one place and help you get paid because that is our goal. That is the most important thing in this whole process. Yes. Yeah, so Stripe.js is a really thin thing. All it's doing is taking credit card information and associating it with your Stripe account. And so if I jump back and I look at the form, when I fill out this form, if I took that Ruby course, right, and I didn't actually do that Stripe create charge call, all that would happen is that publishable key is a very restricted key, and then all it can do is create tokens. And so when I enter in this information, it uses this public thing, it saves the information in my account, and then that information does nothing. It doesn't talk to the bank. It doesn't create any charges or cost anything. It's a completely free thing, merely meant as a way for you to save payment information and then act on it later. When you come back and you use your secret key, that's the important part. That's when you can start making charges. And so if someone gets hold of your publishable key, which they will by just visiting the website, it's not a big deal. And it's built this way. Make sense? Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So the only fee that you have to worry about with Stripe, well, there's two fees. There's 2.9% plus 30 cents per successful transaction. This means that you're not getting charged if it's Amex or it's international. There are no monthly fees. There are no fees for refunds. There are no fees for failed transactions. It's only when you get paid that we have to take a little bit of money off. The other fee is a $15 fee for chargebacks. These are rare, especially from customer service, and so it's not something that we really get caught up on. But those are the two things that we transfer. There are no monthly fees or startups for any bit like that. Other questions? Yeah. Oh.
How are you guys not scared of not asking for $1 million?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is actually a really interesting thing for me when I started out. It was, I'm always used to these credit card forms that ask me for, my life history, and they want to know everything. It turns out that the bank doesn't care about most of those things. expiring in the CVC when determining whether or not to accept the charge. Now the address can be helpful in that we can tell you if the address passes based on the street number and the zip code. And so if you're running, so I got it up, but if you're running into fraud issues or anything like that, you can use this as a way to do additional fraud checks. And I talk about that more in Stripe Answers, and if you email me too, I'm more than happy to talk about that. So, I can do one more question, I think. Never? I'm sorry? Oh yeah, so there's a 7-day delay, 7 calendar days from the time that a charge is created. And so this means that you do get rolling payouts. And so if I create a charge on Monday, it's in my bank account next Monday. If I create a charge on Tuesday, it's in my bank account next Tuesday, and so forth. And so that's the only delay. All right? Okay. And I will be over there and walking around in a blue shirt if you guys have any questions or want to talk. It's right now.